It's time for another Flashpoint Q&A here on the Flashpoint channel. And in his first appearance on the Flashpoint channel is Mr. Henry G, who's
Wow.
joining us. He's decided
We said
that
Henry eventually, bring him over. Couldn't afford him as a caster though, so I tell it someone else carry the can on that one.
he is
Well,
he is an ESL defector, as I like to consider him, joining the resistance, as it were, here over at Flashpoint, attempting to make teams better for us. I'm deeply appreciative of the improvement that you are hopefully going to impress upon the Cloud9 team.
Dude, he already cleaned up all that American trash. He got rid of them immediately. He just put them in the fucking bin. Tore their contracts up in front of their faces. They were all crying like, "Please have a family and kids." He was like, "Listen, I'm Henry G. You see those show matches I lost? Never again."
Yeah, hey everyone. That is all true. That's happened. It's good to be here. Good time we've kicked it off with, and yes, very excited for Cloud9. And to be honest, with Flashpoint, it needed a bit of a shot in the arm, didn't it? So it's good I'm here. To be honest with you,
I completely agree with you. Shout out to Cloud9 for doing something.
Sure.
I'm going to guess spending a lot of money. Not jumping down. I'm just saying, I don't think Henry was cheap.
That's a fair comment, Duncan. That's a very fair comment. Astute observation.
Spending money, good.
That's right. So obviously, let's start with. I mean, there's so much to talk about today, right? The major was canceled, which everybody knew, but wasn't really officially known. Let's put it that way. So that's definitely a big chunk of news. There's a big chunk of news about Valve also in that same post reconsidering potentially the role of coaches within teams, because they have figured out what everyone else already figured out, which is that coaches were communicating with teams during many of these online matches in ways that would not have been normally allowed. So we have potential competitive integrity issues when it comes to Valve's perception of how the game should be played. And hopefully that doesn't ruin things for coaches, because that would really suck. And I think that personally, one of the things that I really like about Counter-Strike is that the coaches can have a say on plays that are being run in between rounds and give constant feedback, partially because I'm an American football fan and that's kind of how American football works, so I enjoy that dynamic. But I think it adds a lot of depth to the game, and if we were to remove the coaches, I think the quality of the gameplay would go down. You guys in agreement?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of Bill Belichick's over in this spot as well, Monty. A lot of people who just want to see everything that's happening.
Tape things, yeah.
Shout out to Jason, by the way. Good first week of coaching. Looks like the position's going to be removed within 10 days of signing.
It's okay. He can come back.
Dude, imagine if Moses literally, Valve's just like, yeah, actually, we're just going to close your roll down. It's like, but I gave up everything. It's like, sorry, Jason.
Fortunately, there will always be room on Flashpoint for
Absolutely.
Jason Moses O'Toole. He doesn't have anything to worry about. We will accept him in his exile from the coaching role, should that occur,
at a lower cost, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he also has to put on a Twitter video of him begging. That's also part of it.
Amazing.
Please, Flashpoint on his knees. Please take me back. I'm sorry I spurned you.
Well, the uncomfortable thing is, Monty, I actually just did a podcast. I won't reveal any more details, but actually it's with Moses, obviously it's Counterpoints, and it hasn't been released yet. It's going to come out tomorrow, and it's actually where we're basically sort of wrecking all the TOs in the scene, because like I was tweeting, I want people to it's actually in light of Henry's leaving interview, where he was mentioning all the problems in the scene, and we have to fix some of these. We have to have long-term partnerships with people where they don't just not know where they're working in 3 months. But the problem is, Moses obviously thought he had free reign because he thought he had a different job completely locked down, didn't he? So he goes off in this one. So sorry, Jason, listen, that's content, mate. That's already in the vault. My hands are tied, baby. The producer says we've got to get it out. So I'd love to help you, but
I mean, I think it's also good that people, one of the upsides to casters going into these positions is that it's very good PR for the teams, obviously, and they get people who can actually be public faces for the teams and go on shows. In fact, I think it's probably in Liquid's best interests for Jason Moses to continue appearing on these shows and doing content. Just like I think it's good for Cloud9 that, Henry, you're on this show and that you could potentially be on shows as a guest or something in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we do have a bit of a problem still with the players not having the biggest personalities. Obviously, their focus is going to be playing the game and making sure that the results come through. But we've never really had proper figureheads representing organizations or CSGO teams. We've had coaches that have kind of come in and tried to take on that responsibility. But I feel like, especially with the GM role coming in, like bringing in members of the community, figureheads, as it were, it does make a lot of sense to me. At least I might be quite biased there, but I feel like we can do a lot of damage out here and actually bring some real value to the CSGO team, give them a voice, deliver their message, and actually relay everything the team's working on.
Appear on whatever content I want as I talk
Exactly.
to Cloud9,
Yeah, that was my follow-up.
I'll ask Jack to lend you to me for certain pieces of content that I want to make. It's great. It's great. It's great.
It's all worked out for you, Monty, as usual.
You decided not to come on Flashpoint earlier, but now I can just make it happen, and now I can just force that issue. So it's wonderful.
Well, before
for me.
I had nothing to promote. What was I promoting before? Nothing. Just come watch Counter-Strike. I'll be there. Now I've actually got a message. I've got objectives. I've got goals. Something tangible that we didn't have before. I actually have a purpose, which is good.
So I really.
Plus, you can't see all the teams are shit in Flashpoint now, Henry, because that's sort of owns you, mate. So
well, I do.
For that one.
I still do maintain that in the sense that we're going to be winning the next season of Flashpoint, so don't worry about that. My team will be conquering that trophy.
All right.
I like the confidence. Probably well deserved, given what's been going on with Flashpoint. So you did a very good interview with Decay when it came to your exit, and obviously I'm somebody who's still doing on-camera work, but has taken a step back as well. And then we've seen Moses and a bunch of other top-tier casters kind of leave the scene. What can you explain your motivation here behind why you were attracted to this GM role and what it was about casting that ceased to control your interest?
I think in terms of commentary, it got to the point after 6 years and kind of burning myself out every single year as it's been well documented how many events I've done. I did 150 like in a space of 5 to 6 years. Got to the point where I was just doing the events just to make sure I still had my livelihood because I was getting no support, no structure from the tournament organizers. It felt like, I knew they would use me, but unless I committed to doing every single event, there was a question mark whether I'd actually be invited back next year, whether they'd start using someone else. And the older I get, like now kind of just turned 32, I kind of need some stability in my life. And I feel like I've completed all the goals and objectives I had as a commentator. And for me, I've always wanted to move forward. And I felt like I was spinning my wheels a little bit, especially as we enter this online era. It's just not what I do. I don't commentate online CS. I don't like studio CS. What I've done over the years is electrify crowds and do the arenas and make it the most hype possible event I can of my passion and my knowledge of the game. I like to give that out and make sure it's delivered in a way I think it should be. And I just wasn't getting that anymore after doing Pro League and the Road to Rio for 60 days straight. It just kind of took it all out of me. I lost a lot of my passion. I didn't feel I was commentating at a level that was necessarily good enough for what I was used to putting out there in stadiums. So for me, it was working out what my next step is. And fortunately, the GM role, I still think it's yet to be defined within esports, not even just CSGO. I think it's a bit of a dark art what the GM role really even is. And I think it's an opportunity for me. It's a perfect time while Cloud9 kind of down there in the doldrums right now in terms of their CSGO reputation. It's kind of been lost since 2018, and it's a good chance for me to blaze a trail ahead and show how the GM role can be effective and how someone like me in my position can actually attract very strong players, make these deals happen, and relay the message and be a face of the team. I feel like that's something that hasn't been explored or done correctly yet. It has been done in other games to some extent, but I feel like there's so much room to be done in terms of development of this role. And I hope people look back on this change as someone, what I did in commentary, I did the same thing in the GM role as well. That's a long answer, but that's pretty much all of that.
I even think that one area that I can tell you myself from investigating behind the scenes of Flashpoint, trying to get teams to upgrade players, one thing I learned very quickly was this is where organizations are still years behind where you'd imagine. Like, when you consider how much just buyouts cost to an individual CS player, it's crazy that a lot of orgs have one GM in the whole org. So this one guy is supposed to know like Rocket League and League of Legends and see, and not only that, he's acting as his own scout often. Like, he's supposed to know how good these players are. So I won't drop down on who they are, but like, for example, there was one org where when I went to them with some players, the guy they sent me as their GM was like their old Overwatch coach or something. I was like, you know, it's a CS, right? Like, this guy's not going to know the players. Like, it doesn't matter if you look, like, you can't just look on HLTV and then sign the player.
Yeah, it's dead on, because the problem we have right now is you can be a GM, you could definitely manage an established team, you can get them into their interviews, you can work with the sponsors, you make sure they need what they are, what they need to be. But in terms of attracting actual talent to an organization like Cloud9, sure, it's an amazing brand, but the trust required for me to even engage just the initial conversation with a player, they're so cagey about it. No one wants to be caught out of line having conversations and stuff. And thankfully, over 15 years of playing this game and building a reputation as a player and a commentator, I know every single player. I have a very good relationship with them, and they all trust me because they know I get it. I'm not looking to screw anyone over or get them in trouble, just trying to find them the best possible deal. And it's been really great, actually, the kind of reception I've got from players when I have approached them. Everyone's so willing to talk to me, and I just don't think you'd get that from an anonymous GM or a manager who hasn't got the reputation built up within CSGO. I feel like everyone's so protective over what we do. You have to be someone established within the community to facilitate this role, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's not ideal in terms of having to maybe replace some of the GMs that are doing a good job. But I feel like if you want to sign the best players, you've got to hit someone in control that actually has the trust of the people in mind.
I think it is crucial to that role, but I think it's also important to remember that even though you have that, the industry hasn't been around long enough to move a bunch of people who have that trust into the GM positions. Yep. You know, you're not the first wave, you're kind of the second wave of that happening. But also, I just want to be careful and say it's not necessarily the fault of every team for doing that. There's just a limited number of people who are in your position who have that relationship built up already over a decade plus of experience, right? So it's not reasonable to say, why doesn't everybody has this? That's going to happen naturally as people get older in this space and as more and more people get that experience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, though, this will be a turning point. I feel like where a lot of commentators are getting a little bit jaded, perhaps, especially in CSGO with the workload. If you can see that our response to COVID and the way we're kind of facilitating events right now, I don't think it's an attractive prospect, especially for top-level commentators having to work as many days in a row as what they're doing right now. It just breaks your back. It's just too much. And I feel like we will have some more transitions in CSGO. I'm not sure who would go next, to be honest. I can't think of any. I guess Sponge would be a likely candidate. It would be the most
probably a good one. Yeah,
that would be the most ideal candidate, I suppose. But yeah, you have to build up a certain reputation. It has to be a certain character, I think, that can actually consider this role. So yeah, absolutely agree with you. It can't just be anyone. And we've only just got to that point now where we're kind of considering that correctly in CSGO.
It brings up the other problem, which is that we shouldn't have to choose between those people who have extensive knowledge of the scene, who we expect to tell the stories of that history on camera. Like, we shouldn't have to choose between having that or having knowledgeable GMs. That's just a fucking shitty decision that exists, unfortunately, because clearly we're losing a lot without you having you on camera as much anymore. Now, there's the advantage that I imagine when we get to Flashpoint, you know, you'll be there for some segments or you'll drop in as a guest at times, but we're not going to have you dedicated on the mic because you have other duties that you have to take care of, right? So it just sucks, right? Thornton and I had this conversation yesterday or 2 days ago, rather, on the start of Summoning Insight, where we were talking about your move and discussing how it's just horrible for the longevity and history of the scene and ability to have continuity in a game for the audience when you don't have these commentators who view it really as a long-term career option past a certain point. It's something that you can use to get a certain level of fame and industry connections, but so many of the best people are now moving on to other roles within the industry.
I guess that was kind of my motive of the quite raw interview I did with DK, as you mentioned earlier. I'm not sure what your guys' opinion is that, whether maybe I went too hard, maybe I was too real.
No, I thought it was great.
And yeah, I felt like no one was going to say it. And unfortunately, I can only say it on the way out. It's very difficult to make those comments when you're still an active member of the commentary team. I've had these feelings for a long time, but I'll be honest with you, this is such uncharted territory. It's not like this career has been around for 20 years or so, and we all know how it all goes. Like, this would unearthing new areas every single day, and it's kind of getting more and more crazy with different compromises and caveats coming into the scene. And obviously this week of CSGO just goes to show you that anything can and will happen. It's a very complicated time, but I don't know. In terms of the GM role, I think it's certainly something that's going to evolve. And I hope to be one of the people then in CSGO, at least we look back on and say, right, he showed us how it could be done.
Let's talk. So guys, I know you have a lot of questions in Twitch chat, and I am reading them. There's a lot of questions along the similar lines, so I'm going to try and combine a bunch of these into...
How many questions do you allow the public to ask? Do you give them like a hard cap? Are we giving them like 5?
Well, no. It depends on if they're interesting ones, but there's a lot of sort of similar ones that I'm going to smash into one question.
I'm happy to answer anything. I'm a very open and transparent person, so bring it on. It's all good.
So some people are asking about coaching strategies. Now, let's start off with Mr. Greer is not the coach of the team. He's the general manager. And Kassad...
Thank God for that.
Kassad is going to be the coach, someone that used to be on Renegades and 100 Thieves. And considering I used to own that core of players, I was very impressed with what he did with that roster after I sold the team, because I saw the potential there, but they really struggled to reach it. And it feels like he unlocked a lot of that potential. He's very well respected as a coach. So people are asking... Don't be confused about that. Henry's not the coach. But why did you choose Kassad? And then to bridge this question, what is the coaching / management philosophy that you guys together are going to bring to the team?
Why did I choose Kassad? I feel like he is one of the most logical coaches there is. He is very passionate and hardworking. I want someone working with me that works as hard as I do. Without blowing my own trumpet, whenever I commit myself to a project like this or any sort of new career, I'm throwing, like, they're not just buying my time, they're buying my passion as well. I'm going to be throwing my life at this. I will be at every single tournament with the team. I will be at every single practice. And I want someone who's operating on that level as well. And the only coach I came across that works on the level is Kassad, and he demands the very best of the organization, of the players, and he has a very distinct idea of how to bring that all together. Everyone respects him, and him and I, in terms of building a Counter-Strike roster, have very similar ideas of how that should be done. If I could show you the spreadsheets we work on in terms of the roles we've built out for our team and how we want to fill those holes, make sure we have every single player working in our favor. And to be honest with you, considering how respected he is, it just goes in tandem with what I'm doing. That the fact we've got the tag team duo of me kind of pulling the strings up top, Kassad worrying about the operations beneath with the team specifically. I've made it very clear that there's no any other kind of staff involved. I am the kind of middleman between the team and Cloud9. Kassad handles everything else. He doesn't have to handle any of the bullshit I'm going to be doing. I'll be the bad guy. Any decisions that have to be made in that regard, nice. Kassad just focuses on the play. That's it. I will handle everything else, and we are working as a unit. Like, him and I are on the phone every single day. As is pretty clear right now, we don't have our 5-man roster established, but trust me, the talks we're having, some of the most exciting transfer moves and prospects of CSGO history. I feel like it's going to be, I don't use that word colossal lightly. It's not a marketing campaign or a plan of ours to kind of get some hype up there. I'm not joking. Like, working with myself and Kassad is a really attractive prospect right now in CSGO. And that's the reason I did it, because I know how respected he is, and he has very similar visions to me. So I would never be a coach. I don't think that's a role for me. I don't have the 2020 Counter-Strike knowledge to facilitate that and actually elevate a team. I could maybe help out in broad strokes and tell them what they're doing wrong in terms of communication and general spacing, that sort of thing. But I'm certainly not a Counter-Strike coach. Kassad is. I trust his judgment, and he has my full support in every decision he makes. But big picture stuff is me, in the servers, Kassad. That's the way it works.
I can even say as well, because I've actually known Kassad quite a while, and I was obviously trying to get him into some of the Flashpoint teams as soon as I knew he was leaving 100 Thieves. He was also in a very similar position to Henry. Like, he's been coaching for years now, and he's had such incredible success taking these teams from like tier 2, quite frankly, to tier 1 teams, top 2. And he also was kind of finding, like, you just bump your head against the ceiling, there's no way you can go. Like, coaching for most of these guys they're just another player, basically, that's not in the server. They go with the team, and that's all the input they get. They do the demos, but they don't get like much say in the transfers or some of these other. So I know he was looking for not just any offer, but something more in depth, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, he wouldn't just sign for any team. He's not after the big paychecks. He's not just looking for the big names. He will only sign to a project that he knows makes sense and that he can work with. That's someone I want. I'm not trying to sign the biggest names. I'm not trying to blow everyone away. It's like, wow, look at this amazing team he's crafted. The biggest names of all time. Like, I feel like international projects in CSGO so far that have been started from the ground floor have always been focused around the players. And so if you think back to where FaZe really began, was it Kinguin, Duncan? Was that where the project first started? Players started there. That's their super team. They get picked up. They add some more big names. They get picked up by FaZe, and it's kind of plugging holes. They're trying to find the perfect setup. I don't want to go through that journey. I don't want to have to go through what OG just did as well, taking 10 months to come online and trying to fix all your issues and saying you need more time. Honestly, I don't buy that. I just think it was set up incorrectly. I feel like with Kassad and I at the steering wheel of this whole operation, we know what we need to do to build a world-class Counter-Strike team quickly. As I mentioned, we're trying to build for Season 2 of Flashpoint, which is coming up pretty soon. And I'm not going to be going in there saying, oh, we need more time. We're going to be preparing a bit more. Don't expect much from us here. We're going in to win that tournament. And I don't even have a 5-man roster right now. That's a pretty bold statement. So in terms of what we're doing and how we're putting it together, I don't think it's ever been crafted before correctly. There's certainly been plenty of international projects, but nothing to this caliber. No one's planned it as efficient as we have and made sure we have all the pieces in place before we make our move. So in terms of Kassad, perfect partner in crime.
Also, guys, we can't ask about the players that are going to be on this roster, obviously, because they haven't been announced yet. Guys, please, no. There was Alex made an interesting announcement today. Alex made a very interesting announcement. Mr. Greer here responded to that announcement, but who knows what happens in the future.
Here's the thing, Alex, my dude, listen, could you at least keep it fucking vaguely, so there's some suspense. You can't just take the post that shows Cloud9's gonna have someone, then put you I'm on a thing tomorrow and be like, it's like that thinking emoji. You may as well just be, it's me. You may as well just say you may as well just be pointing himself. What are we to think about there?
He was merely pointing out it's a coincidence that he was leaving the same time there was a live show.
That is an awful
coincidence.
Sure,
it is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Wow. How could that possibly happen?
I don't know. I'm excited to see the live stream tomorrow, though. Whatever he's got up his sleeve, that sounds interesting. Good luck to him.
Just post all your eyes emojis on Twitter. You got to love how gloriously unsubtle this industry is at times. Meanwhile, Henry, you're just you're getting a little ahead of yourself too, just getting so excitable on the old twitter.com, so.
Well, I had to make a statement. I had to announce my presence again. Before, I felt like I was shackled,
I really think it was smart of you, because there's no way that Alex could have known that, if you were interested in professional players, not like you had tweeted hey, professional players, please come contact me. If you're interested in being part of the Cloud9
listen,
project.
Henry's already within 2 days adapted to the industry, right? Everyone else is tragic, the major's cancelled. He's like, good news, guys. Now you can all come join me. All works to my favor. It's typical business, man.
It did work out great for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. There is part of me, obviously I don't want the major to be cancelled, but I would never want a major to be played online, and it does work heavily in my favor that it's cancelled. So you know what? I'm not happy about it, but it does work out quite nicely for my particular operation. So I will say that much.
By the way, that's actually one area that none of us unfortunately could have predicted, which is actually, I do think, a factor as to why actually some of the teams haven't signed better team players in Flashpoint.
Absolutely.
It turned out that whole RMR system meant you had to keep the players, otherwise you lose the points. Yep. So you were kind of an idiot if you were a top team, you let a player go. And similarly, if you're a player, you only go join a new project that hasn't qualified yet. You're kind of in a catch-22 there.
Yeah, I did unfortunately enter this arena at the worst possible time in terms of everyone's waiting for the outcome of the major. The fact we didn't even know if there was a major happening at this point in September, and it's happening in November. It's kind of crazy, right? For me to try and sign players, it's taken a lot. I've signed a few already, but for me to even start those conversations, say, look, I haven't got a roster, I haven't got a major slot, but I have got Cloud9. That's about all I can bring to the table. It's very difficult to have those chats, and the most common response would be, oh man, can I just get back to you after the major? Which is fair enough, because everyone wants to see where that's going. And I feel like, although my tweet was a bit tongue-in-cheek, I'm dead serious. That should open up conversation now.
Sure.
Do people really want to wait for a major? For the sake of bombing out, coming last place, a lot of weak teams out there right now. And if you want to wait for the sake of your team, I would say that's a bad career move individually.
Also, with a bunch of those RMR points getting reset due to the cheating allegations, players on those teams, if they're going to reset all their points anyway, you know what I mean? Might as well take a change if they're looking at having another better chance at a future major at a point in time which no one knows. And honestly, it just seems to me at least, it seems kind of pointless at this juncture, because why would you even have the major in your mind anymore? Because Valve said in this post, we don't know when it's going to be. It won't happen until we can have RMR events on LAN, right?
Sure.
Which we're not anywhere close to having, most likely. And at the same time, they just did this entire RMR event cycle, got a bunch of points.
You don't want to do
For
it
what?
twice and
For what?
cancel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so now we know that you can do all of the build up to the major and still not have a major. There's nothing to say that that won't happen again. And it's not Valve's fault. There's just no way to control this scenario. So why focus on the major right now when you can focus on maybe making a change to a good roster like Cloud9 or other Flashpoint partner teams?
Yeah,
players.
If there are any other attractive offers out there, I'm sure they could give them a chat.
I'm just saying. We have 8 partner teams. Consider them as well.
With the lineup I'm creating, I will say this much: it will open the floodgates, as Duncan hinted to on Twitter yesterday. I think the move I'm going to make and the team I will announce, it's not a full UK lineup. I'll confirm that much. It's not a fun team or anything like that. This will be a world-class elite Counter-Strike team with big household names that you guys will get excited about and should open up the opportunities for other Flashpoint teams to show this is a league worth playing in with some of the world's best. And hopefully that comes to fruition.
Thank
I was
you.
hoping he was bringing back Easy Skins players, could get the old boys back together. Obviously, Chad comes into the game.
Can't talk about that yet. We're still working on it. Under the air.
You'll be our messiah, Henry G, because you will, if you can do that, you'll have done something that no one else could do for Flashpoint. Our owners, the talent.
You've had one season. Give yourself a chance. You can still turn this around.
It's not too late for us.
I'm super hopeful. I think it's great. I think this change had to happen. Someone had to make the move. I think you guys knew it would happen eventually. I'm glad I'm the man to do it because it's a pretty complex challenge and it's going to be a difficult one to pull off. But honestly, I'm halfway there already, and I've only been doing this job 1 week. So give me a month. We'll see what I come up with.
That's right. Now we need your photoshops of Henry G as Flashpoint Jesus saving us.
Well, I have planned. I said to myself, I'm not going to cut my hair now until the end of the year. Just going to run this out. So maybe I'll be there by the time Flashpoint comes along.
That's right. Sounds like a great skit for Flashpoint too. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
Sounds like a great skit.
Exactly.
All right. Let's take a look at some of these other questions. Here's a good one. Talking about roster creation and player changes, how impactful would it be to have some kind of rules come out, possibly from CSPPA, regarding absurd buyouts in the scene? I would love to see a cap on buyouts based on a multiplier of players' salaries, so it's just not however much money the team feels like selling them.
Bearing in mind he's the GM of a team looking for players, this is the biggest fucking alley-oop I've ever seen of all time. Like, wonder where he's going to go on this one. Like, go on, Henry, what do you think? Good. Is it going to have an expensive buyout?
Someone, I will come on this right now. So there is a bit of a problem within CSGO right now. Someone who's dealing with these contracts every single day. There is a new plague that's come in of development contracts that have entered CSGO, and it seems to be the new trajectory we're going in. It seems like a lot of orgs are buying up free agents, younger players, and whacking a massive buyout on them, and they'll pay them very little. They just know that they're going to be good in the future. We'll sign them to a big org now, we'll get them in a nice position, and at this point, we'll be able to sell them in the future. That seems to be where people are hedging their bets right now in terms of CSGO, and I think that's a massive problem. I feel like there should be some sort of clauses in there that's relative to their salary. If you can't afford to pay these names the salaries they're worth, and it's not in comparison to their buyout, you should not be able to sell them for whatever you want, considering the climate you find yourself in 2 years. I feel like that's really going to hurt us all going forward. And I don't know what the solution is. It's difficult to come up with established buyouts when you first sign a player. I'm dealing with that right now as well, because you have no idea what the future holds. So I definitely get it. But yes, I agree with Monty's point that being relative to the salary and working out a formula from that is the only way forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the example he was alluding to there is like, for example, obviously North just did this, where they have a guy that they've been testing in their team, but they clearly don't want now. But the logic goes, they don't want him to be like what's happened with like Bobski and Madlines, where they've sort of gone round North. Like, they never got the talent pipeline. They're not in that mix anymore. So they're trying now, while there's no rules, to just say like, well, screw it. Like, if there's anyone that you think in the future might be someone you'd want, just lock them up now. If you don't want them, you can sell them to someone else. So it's going to become a bit predatory if we let too much of that happen, in my opinion.
What is your opinion on the academy teams making a bit of a resurgence, Duncan? As far as I was aware, that wasn't really possible anymore. But like,
it isn't.
But the reason I did academy team and things like that, popping up again.
Well, the funny thing is, actually, this is something where I made a video on this recently where I was pointing out that, like, actually, it's unfortunate because the time that they were killed, if that had existed, we wouldn't necessarily have this kind of like massive buyout scenario.
Yep.
So here's the funny thing people probably won't realize is, actually, for that, the best thing that could happen would be that Flashpoint would succeed. Because if Flashpoint succeeded, in theory, the partner teams could make like a development league below where they just own those teams, but they could own them because they'd never play each other. They wouldn't be in Flashpoint. And that way, we could have a real way where like it's got its own platform to watch it. And there's no, unfortunately, the real problem we have in Counter-Strike compared to other games is Tier 1 isn't locked off. In fact, sometimes Tier 1 players do the same bracket that like, in theory, we would if we put together a team and could enter it from like an amateur level, So it means you're not allowed at the moment by Valve to have the academy team.
Yeah, it is kind of mad. And I'll be honest with you, there's been so many young guns that have approached me and like show me what they can do. And like I've seen their play and I really want to support them and find a system that works for them. But what can I do? I can't just. I could do what Astrala's doing and start signing 8-9 players and just say this is the official lineup, and everyone knows it's not. We'll just kind of keep plugging holes and making sure everything's okay. I would love to have the opportunity to have a wing of my operation that's developing talent, and we're with the focus of bringing them up to the main team eventually. Like I think that would be fantastic across all sports. We have that sort of programs in place, and we just don't really have. I've got to choose 5 players, maybe 6 at a very like a massive push there. That would be a controversial move to me and announce 6 players still. So what am I supposed to do if someone gets injured or they get burnt out? There's no real solution in place right now. It is a bit of an issue. And I think that would rectify it. But what was the original question? Something about we've gone off on a bit of a tangent here.
Oh no, just about the absurd player buyouts. No, these are all relevant things. These are all relevant things.
Exactly. Yeah, the buyouts are, to be fair, that they're not insane for the players you'd imagine they are. Like the elite players, they're crazy because they're still massive assets of many teams. There's a lot of teams that are not doing very well right now, but they have their superstar players, and you can probably imagine some of the names that
$1 million type buyouts we're talking here.
Exactly. Yep. And they're the heart of the team, and I completely get it. They put such high buyouts on them to protect their own livelihood. If they lose that one player, the whole operation's over, and I get that. But still, if the player's unhappy and they're not getting what they need and they feel like the resources provided are not good enough, that's a problem itself. That's going to make everyone unhappy and not be a productive unit. So,
and the reason behind capping the buyouts, guys, is because it also means that the players themselves are better protected. Because if you want to have $1 million buyout, if you say that a player's buyout can only be 2x their salary or something like that, their annual salary, then you at least, if you want to have a high buyout, you have to be paying that player a lot of money. So the player is getting something out of that arrangement. They can't just be on some shitty deal and then the org sells them for $1 million and makes $900,000 worth of profit off of it. Like that's it's bullshit. So it does need to be changed.
The real problem, like listen, the initial problem obviously is you can't get the players you want because of the buyout. But the knock-on from that, people always forget, is actually, funnily enough, what happened to people like Smooya briefly. Alex himself is a good example. Like these guys aren't being used by those teams. Like they're just on the bench, and that's
we don't even get to watch them. That's
because your salary does not have to be commensurate to the buyout. Right, the guy who's paying you goes, yeah, I'll keep paying you a monthly amount, which, by the way, usually in the contract, you might even get less as well. But then simultaneously, if you want to leave, well, I'm not just going to give you to my rival, so it's going to cost him megabucks. So you can get in what we call contract prison. It's what Kiyoshima was in for a while. You're sat there, and as much as everyone at home would think, oh, it's great getting paid to do nothing, it isn't when you're a pro player. That's your career. This is the prime of your career.
Yeah, and also, it's for the fans, you're just being robbed of watching the best possible esport. I mean, we don't get to see these good players that should be in professional leagues and deserve to be there competing. So it just sucks for the fans and sucks for the audience.
Completely agree. I trust me, this is something I've really dealt with in the last week. I wasn't aware of it being such a massive problem, but I can confirm after dealing with so many different agents this week and organizations that there definitely is a problem with that. Buyouts are a problem, and it's something I'm working on, but it's not really a battle I can sort out right now. But yeah, certainly an issue.
All right, let me deal with some questions really quick about Flashpoint 2. Yes, we are planning to do Flashpoint 2, hopefully on LAN in November. Now, with the cancellation of the major, that might have affected our schedule, our thoughts around the schedule a little bit. So with this news, we're looking at that. But the plan is to have a LAN event in November.
The plan is, though, right, what we're going to do, guys, is we're not going to tell you until the day before. That way ESL can't possibly sort of get the jump on us, because I've figured out that, we've just been basically giving information to the enemy, haven't we? So at this point in time, what we'll do is we'll just, one day, out of nowhere, it'll just pop up. ESL will probably go, bloody hell, now we have to organise like fucking. And then they'll do what they can, but it'll be too late then, won't it? So.
That's right. No one knows when Flashpoint will arrive. Yeah.
Not even me. I'm going to actually do like some sort of sci-fi movie and get myself like deprogrammed so I don't know what it is. And then they'll just, one day, Monty will just call me. He'll just go like, Corralho, and that'll be like the activation code. And I'll just come online and I'll know where to go.
Sounds great. Let's see here. There were questions about EU versus NA for the C9 roster. Now, I talked to Jack yesterday on the Nines, and he said that for now, the team is going to be based in Europe because they're looking, obviously, Henry's there, and they would like good players. But the eventual goal and what has been communicated to all potential players is that they will eventually move to Los Angeles.
That is true. That is something I'm making very clear to all the players I approach. And to be honest with you, that's not been a massive issue at all. And I say we will be eventually moving to Los Angeles. Obviously, that's difficult to plan right now. We have no idea when that's going to be possible in terms of visas, establishing a facility, etc. I don't think that'll be happening anytime soon. I can't really say for certainty, but that's the overall goal. Just because Cloud9, based on their operations out there, we have a lot of resources there, our staff, everything we could possibly need is out there, and we would be nothing about the support of them. So that's the plan, but initially we'll be based in Europe. How that goes down, I'm not really sure just yet. I haven't really got a starting five at this point, but I do want to be prepared for Flashpoint. Obviously, we are going to boot camp somewhere in Europe before the event. Where that's going to be, I'm not quite sure. It looks like Serbia is a very attractive prospect. A lot of teams boot camping there right now, allows us to travel. Due to the COVID situation, it seems like it's the only countries accepting international visitors at this point. A lot of teams are boot camping there.
Kasad is there too,
speaking,
right?
Kasada, that's one of the main reasons we chose that. A lot of teams are boot camping right now, and he's got all the contacts, so he'd be able to hook that up and make sure we have everything we need. So that's our plan. I think it's a pretty strong one in terms of our initial tournaments. Eventually moving to LA, I would say at the midpoint next year, but it's not really in our optics just yet. We're kind of focusing on the tournaments that are coming
up. People want to know if you'll return with Sadikist for one last hurrah at any point in time. No.
When I say I'm done with something, that's it. I guess at the very most, I would come back for like a show match or something like that, but I won't be commentating any Pro CS ever again. Unfortunately, I know that's sad. I probably said that a bit callously, but as far as I'm concerned, this is my new challenge. I don't need any other distractions. So maybe a show match, that's it.
All right. Well, Maui Snake, of course, one of our analysts on Flashpoint, he has a question that other people have asked as well, which is what are you going to do for the CS team once you have the players and the coach set beyond scouting? What do you anticipate your day-to-day role being with the team?
So like I said, everyone who kind of knows what I do, I was a former pro myself. I built many teams from the ground up before. I will be part of every single practice. I will be part of every single tournament, making sure the players have everything they could possibly need between the tournament organizers, working with our partners, making sure that they've got everything under control. And I will say this very clearly now, I've fought so hard to make sure there's no extra obligations for my players. None of them are asked to stream. I don't want any of that nonsense or distraction. We're not trying to get a return on our investment or anything like that. We are focused on winning trophies. That is my focus, and making sure that's all they have to think about. So that's in terms of what I'll be doing. Difficult to give you something tangible and give you a list of my duties and responsibilities, but just assume it to be everything. There'll be no one else involved in terms of the 5 players in Cloud9. I will be the middleman between everything in terms of the organization, the sponsors, and anything in between, working with the tournament organizers and making sure they focus on the game.
Yeah. So to give you guys a sense of what happens, considering my wife was the general manager of a team, the London Spitfire and Overwatch League, under the Cloud9 umbrella. So also, similar dynamic to how they work with the ownership group. What she was doing, like Henry is saying, is that she was organizing all the logistics stuff for the team so the coaches and players didn't have to worry about it, making sure that everything was taken care of. Like she was, managing the property that they were living in, making sure that they had an in-house chef, making sure that their schedule with this, because they have to do sponsorship deliverables, is all met, right? Talking with the coaches about possible roster changes, negotiating for contracts so that, as Henry said, he's always the bad guy. So if you need to kick somebody, you don't want the team to hate or fear the coach. So Henry comes in and he becomes the bad cop to the coach's good cop. When those kind of roster decisions or changes within the team are necessary, evaluating things from that perspective, working with the management to figure out budgets for various team activities. My wife was also, traveling to the UK with the London Spitfire to do like a fan tour and setting up events for fan meets and everything like that. Like, so there's a lot. There actually is quite a bit that you can do. And a lot of it is promotional. A lot of it is more around the logistics thing and just trying to take as much out of game bullshit that you have to deal with when it comes to logistics away from the coaches and the players to make it so they just have to focus on the game.
Yeah, and bear in mind as well, like I know we kind of said, like, apart from signing all the players and scouting that is the biggest task in them all. Getting the players in the door, that is the absolute hardest job. Like I've been doing this 2 weeks now, unofficially, I guess, before it was announced. I've the amount of time and focus, attention is required to make sure these, like, I'm the players I'm bidding for, right? It's not as I'm going up to them and say, oh, you fancy joining? There's 6 other organizations involved in that process, bidding, trying to pick these players up. I've got to sell them why they should join Cloud9, right? I've got to give them that dream and facilitate that actually becoming a reality as well. If they do sign with me, I have to make it my life's work to make sure those promises are fulfilled to every single stretch of the imagination. So yeah, sure, getting the initial team in the door, that's my main responsibility, but making sure they're happy throughout their tenure with the Cloud9, that's my main focus, and just protecting them from the bullshit that comes with esports, and they're just focusing on the trophies. That's kind of it.
Luckily as well, if he has to cut someone, I mean, he's been kicking these players when they're fucking down for about 5 or 6 years anyway, Even when they're playing, when they lose the fucking Pistols, they're just going to look over. Is that a bunch three? Was that a fucking ball? You have to save them, mate.
With the president of Casada and myself, no one's going to be fucking around in this team. Everyone's going to be doing what they're supposed to, turning up on time, learning their smokes. That's one thing I'm very happy about. Everyone knows that if they join this team, no one's getting in the way of any of that nonsense. There's going to be a very well-oiled ship. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
So along that line, what you're saying right now, one of the interesting questions that came up a little bit ago is whether you envision a team playing more loose or structured CSGO, which comes down to you and Kassad agreeing on kind of a philosophy on how you want to operate this team. How do you foresee that working for Cloud9? What kind of roster do you want to build?
So we have built this from the ground up. We haven't necessarily planned out the exact players we want, but we've come up with all the roles we want to fill and what kind of play style we want to operate with. I'm not going to get into the specifics exactly how that goes down, but in terms of the blueprint of the team, I know exactly what I want to build. And I have about 5 or 6 players in each position that I think would be ideal candidates, and they're tiered up into that point. And in terms of working with Kassad, like his system among the pro scene is pretty legendary. The way he gets his players to work and the work ethic he demands as well. In terms of making those roles come to life, it's making sure we have the right players there. We're bringing in role players and making sure that it's not going to be like an international project you've seen before. It's like, oh, I signed this big team, but they made me play this role, and I've had to learn this. You know what? That's just been the biggest problem we've had in all of these big rosters that have huge names. They come in and you hear the interview goes, oh, well, I'm doing this role. I'm not really used to it yet. I'm still learning. I was just like, why would you sign him then? Why have you signed him? Why have you brought him in just to put him in a role he can't play? So to answer your question, it's the most important thing to me. A player that joins our squad, we've signed him for the correct reasons. There's logic behind it, and it makes sense for the player. For us, it's a working relationship that actually brings happiness to both of us, and actually we can focus on that role. We're not changing things around every week, and in-game leaders, it's going to be very defined what we're doing from the outgo. And that's why I say to you at the start of this interview, I was like, I'm not going to be coming into this saying we need another 6 months. We're going to rebuild. That's not going to be good enough. That is not an option for me. The players I'm bringing in are aware of that, and that's just not going to be a conversation you'll hear me having or Kassad having on the microphone at any point.
Yeah, I think the blueprint angle makes a lot of sense, especially I like the idea that you got like a short list for each role. So if this person's not available, there's the next guy already, he would fit. Because I agree with you, most of the international teams, all they really did was just sign good players. And after the fact, go like, shit, do we even have anyone who plays ramp? That's
the problem. They threw a load of money at it. Yeah, great orgs, good players, big names for sure, but it didn't make sense. Like the actual logic of the team doesn't work. Okay, so you've got 3 in-game leaders here and big personalities are going to want to talk over this. There's no defined kind of clear captain of the squad. It seems like you're plugging holes over here, making him play this position. It just doesn't make sense. And I can't tell you one project that started and hit the ground running, right? They've gone, wow, that makes a lot of sense. They've signed the right players there. It's always cool players, but how are they going to make that work? That
Yeah.
I'm not going to call out names or anything, but you can imagine.
No,
what
it's
we're-
very
what we're
common in
doing, right?
esports. Very common.
Yeah, and it's just I'm just sick of it. And I feel if I'm going to do this job, like I will do it properly, even if it takes time. And we might not have the perfect lineup for Flashpoint, but I will have a team that makes sense, and I'll make that very clear. Even if we can't get the 5 players we want, I might have some stand-ins for the first tournament, but that's all it will be. We will be going for the perfect team. We won't be making compromises and trying to plug the holes left, right, and center. It's going to be a team that makes sense eventually. I think I can get it done before Flashpoint starts, but you never know.
So people were asking how this compares to Zonic's style of managing Astralis. Can you compare your philosophy to his, if you know what his philosophy is, or how you might be similar or different?
Are they asking me to dissect Zonic's approach to
Give
the
him the
game?
secrets. What does he do?
I have no idea how he manages his team, to be honest. I respect what he does. I don't think I'll necessarily be replicating his methods. I think it's an interesting approach. Someone has to redefine what we're doing so far. I don't think 5 players with this many tournaments, these many play days is sustainable in any stretch of the imagination. It's a big concern of mine. But I don't have the infrastructure right now to sign 8 players on my books and try and operate like that. I think it's an interesting idea, but Valve needs to help us out before we can even start exploring it, because they're not assisting with that approach whatsoever. Like, it's not even clear if I went to an ESL or a DreamHack event right now, if I brought 6 players along, I don't think anyone right now could tell me what the deal would be. Well, can I change them in maps? Can I do that? No one really knows. No one's attempted it, right? So I feel like what they're doing over there is interesting, and I would like to replicate it if it's successful. But for now, I can only really go along the archetype that's been laid out for me, which is 5 players and a coach. I will look into a 6-man. I'm definitely looking into that. I'm looking for a solid 6 who can fill lots of different roles. And if we have to use him, he's aware of all the strategies. He's aware of everything that the teams are going through, and he's an all-round player. If we have to use him, he's just there. And that's about as far as I've gone with exploring what he does. But in terms of the general direction and how Zonic operates his team, I couldn't even tell you the intricacies of that, but I respect what he's doing. It's certainly going against the grain, but I won't be replicating it.
Good question for you. What's your general philosophy on keeping star players happy whilst not giving them too much power in similar ways to how Nico is in FaZe? It's a good question. How do you make a star player happy while not giving them complete control over the team?
First of all, don't have 3-star players is a very good starting point, I would say. Like, you want to make sure you have, like I said, defined roles. I'm not building a team like, sure, I'm bringing in big household names, so they're not like, wow, you've got superstars across the board here. Definitely going to have a couple of stars within the ranks, but in terms of controlling that's Kassar's job, right? Like, he is coming in and we're making sure that everyone's aware that the roles are defined. We're not bringing in players that play similar roles, to go back to the previous discussion. And to be honest with you, the players I want to sign, I'm not signing lots of kind of erratic newcomers and players that are looking to prove themselves and make a big name. The players I have signed, and you will see as time goes on, we're announcing players about once every 2 weeks at this point. You'll see the players are very level-headed, very calm and composed. That's what I've gone for. That's the kind of vibe I like to bring. I don't like to bring in a kind of
Henry has a strict policy against whiny bitches. There will be no whiny bitches on Cloud9.
That's honestly, Kassar and I look down, we look at their persona, we look at their play and their demos and stuff, we look at their personas. We know every single player. We have a very unique stance, or we know every player very well. And Kassar has probably coached them at some point as well. So we can ask other players what they like to play with, and we do our due diligence in that regard. We make sure that we speak to other pros and people have moved on to other teams and don't play with them anymore. What's this guy like to play with? How is he as a star player? What does he need to be happy when he gets upset? What causes that? So there's always going to be heated moments. Like, this is competitive gaming. Like, this is the stakes are very high. There's going to be superstars that are not happy. Their performances won't be good. They'll drop off. And I hope, working with me and Kassar, they'll know we support them and we'll give them everything they possibly need to fulfill their goals. But at the end of the day, it's up to them to perform. We'll give them everything they can ask for. They've given us their requests for their contracts. I think we can live up to those expectations. But yeah, in terms of managing it, that's where I come in. It's my full-time job to make the players happy. That's pretty much my focus.
Okay, let's take a look at, let's see here. I'm going to change this question, which is, you mentioned earlier that a lot of this, and you mentioned this in your interview as to why you were stepping down from commentary, that it's a very brutal circuit, basically. The question was, how will you manage all the travel and expectations? I have a different question for you along these lines, which is, if you were to be Valve and the king of Counter-Strike and you were to arrange a schedule, what would that look like so you wouldn't have the amount of burnout or amount of travel or amount of competing events that there are right now? Where would you strike that balance?
Oh, and by the way, before you answer, I'd just like to say congrats on the upgrade to business class. That is the dream we all had, Henry. You've made it a different route, but you've made it finally.
So it was never realized in the talent world, was
I
it?
actually did. I did manage to get that one into my Overwatch League contract, so that was pretty nice for me back when I was working for Blizzard.
No, that's the thing as talent, by the way. Listen, we get nice rates and all that stuff, but like we also, when we're in the airport and we go through the Instagram stories and like fucking like devices, like just got onto the flight. He's like, they're like, would you like a glass of champagne? Like, fuck this guy. We're still waiting for the economy one. Like, oh, are they boarded yet?
The amount of times, a couple of times I was so like kind of pissed off with the event or tired, I just pay for it myself, and I'd go up to business after paying like $1,000 to get in there myself, and I'd sit down next to the Astralis boys and like that. They go, "Oh, you got business as well." I didn't have the heart to say, "Yeah, I have to pay for myself." I just like,
I totally got it too, guys.
I've dropped $1,000 of myself for a 4-hour flight, and it's like, what am I doing? That was too much. Anyway, back to the question. That is the $1 million question, isn't it? What's the solution to all the bloody burnout in CS:GO at this point? Definitely not what we're doing right now. I feel like we're actively killing the game with, like, if you just look at what's just happened now. We just finished ESL1 Cologne with 2 regions, with Europe, North America, and we've got the same teams one day later starting with Pro League, right? And it's the same studio, the same commentators, the same teams. It's just like, what are we doing? I understand why it has to happen, and it's a real shame, but it's just
I don't understand why it has to happen.
I mean, the companies are losing money. They need to get all the viewership and stuff, don't they?
Content out there. They've got 2 regions. There's only so many days to get it in. I get why it is like that. I'm not saying it's ideal, but like that is dangerous. I think like the fact that it's difficult to even differentiate what Cologne was and what Pro League was. If you're just a layman coming in and you missed one day of the broadcast, you turn it on the next day. It's like, hold on, the same studio, same thing. It's been 1 day since the event. Like, we can't go 1 day between premier tournaments and just move on. Like, that is a massive problem. And like, I definitely don't have the solution. I haven't really thought about it, but having less tournaments and working together with all the tournament organizers, giving them allocated parts of the calendar that leads and amalgamates to a major. I would say 1 major a year is enough for me. I think we've got too much Counter-Strike. It isn't seeing the best teams play. I want the major to be like Worlds is, like it's a proper test of everything coming together. Even if you have some regional tournaments thrown in there as well, I want to see the El Clasico, the big matches, like not every week. It doesn't excite me anymore, like especially online games. That has to change. I don't have the solution to that question, but something along those lines, which will probably never happen, but I hope it does change.
I mean, there are some positives here. I don't know if I agree with the 1 major a year philosophy, because I do like having a couple of them. But for me, really the issue is not so much the majors, it's the minors.
It's the major cycle, basically.
Yeah,
it lasts too long. You get like basically the equivalent of like locked into a roster for that. Like, unfortunately, it's the like impact it has on the event. Like, if you were just already in the major, like I've always said this, that's why I want actually an independent world ranking. It would be awesome if every major was like, right, we invite the top 10 teams and then the other ones play the quad. So then, if you're top 10, you're not going to play the majors. Like you just wait for the majors. But that's why I think he says like have one, because then you can still have your ESL1 quad. You can have your kind of you can have the big events, just not every month, obviously.
Well, and also I think that one of the positive things about the RMR point system has been that you could look at it, either the point system or an independent official ranking of the teams, as the method to go into the major, rather than having the minor cycle system. Because the problem with the minors, right, is that if you're a team, you have to play in your region, so you have to like travel back to that region that you're from in order to compete with them, and they're not very big events comparatively, but they are absolutely necessary for a team to go to the major, which then disrupts the rest of the calendar when we could be having breaks or cooler events than minors, in my opinion.
Yeah, minors are a weird one, aren't they? It's certainly, it used to be a part of my calendar I did not look forward to as a commentator. Like, I don't think anyone really did. It's just a lot of Counter-Strike, a lot of teams you haven't heard of, and a lot of upsets. And especially when a big team would fall down into the minors.
Depressing.
There was a real problem there. Like, I don't know how we're going to fix that, but for me, there's so many teams that just get absolutely wrecked. you have one bad major, like you might not be coming back ever again, because people don't get this right. Like the level of play is much higher than it used to be 5 years ago. Like the teams ranked within the top 75 almost. If you have a look at some of the results coming through, sure, a lot of it's funny. Like we see some of the top teams not doing so well, they're having some bad patches, but trust me, it's rough out there right now. The online play, like the kind of caliber's gone up across the board. And sure, the top teams will always perform the best on LAN, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of getting a game across the line now in any online environment is such a task. And especially when the minors and the qualifiers are all online, even if we were in the normal realms of Counter-Strike, it's very difficult to break through and get out of that minor system. So yeah, it's certainly something that needs looked at again. I'm only really looking into it properly now, obviously with my change of position. It didn't really concern me too often before. But yeah, it's concerning,
well,
especially for someone who's just starting a new team.
It's also, when you build one of these teams, there's always that consideration of which minors you're playing in, whether it's Oceania if you're like 100 Thieves, or whether it's NA, which is or the Americas, which are easier for teams to actually qualify for the major too. And that's really a consideration when people build these rosters, as to where they're going to be competing in terms of ease of access to the major.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, and ease of qualifying in some cases. So that's something to consider as well. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think the majors, I think with this one being cancelled, is a good opportunity to look at it in the future. What was the solution though? What's the event they're replacing it with currently? Is it just another RMR event going forward? Is that the replacement? I guess that's all I saw today. There's another event coming up, but
there wasn't any details, I don't think.
Okay, well, it seems very odd, and it's I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of 2 majors a year. I think it's too much Counter-Strike with like the amount of massive events we have going on right now. Like it's difficult just to keep up with. Who I prefer it, like who won the 2020 major? This team did. They were the champions that year. For me, that's the better approach. But yeah, obviously there's gonna be different opinions.
Here's a good question for you as we reach the end of our hour of time, which is, have you been looking into non-name brand players? So how deep in the scouting pool are we going here? Are you considering a mix of veterans and perhaps younger talent?
I've been down in the bloody swamps here, Monty. Don't worry about that. I definitely just don't have the budget to just get 5 big names and just sign them up and do that. Like I have to understand as well, like sure, like, I'm sure Cloud9 could facilitate something like that, but that's not the team I want to create. I want to make sure we are looking out for our futures as well. We have got some rookies coming in, but they are the best rookies I've ever come across. Like Kasad and I have scouted this talent, and I hope everyone's going to be excited about it. It's certainly going to be a little bit controversial, some of the names that we're playing with, but it's been signed off with all the players I currently have. They are very excited about these rookies, and I think this is one of the most rewarding parts of the job, is giving these opportunities out to players I know that can live up to expectations, instead of just bringing in the same old recycled names and ones you might expect from days gone by. That is something I just want to avoid completely. I don't want to be bringing back names from 2015 that used to be good, or bringing back a sniper you all loved 3 years ago. I just don't. I don't care.
Well, I wonder who you could be referring to. Weird.
I've heard they've got this like really fucking straight fire guy they've found. He's like, he got like sort of like a weird orange wig, and his name's like what was he called again? He's called like Janups or something. Apparently he keeps going on and he's going to destroy Titan if he ever plays him. So I'm looking forward to it. Very exciting young man. You know, still looks like he's 21. Looking good.
Yeah, I think finding rookies, and that's part of my job as well. Making sure that I can keep them in the mindset that's allowing them to play with some of the world's best players. I will be focusing more of my efforts on them and working with Kasad and making sure they're in an environment that's healthy and everyone's kind of watching their back. They're not going to be the world's best players off the bat, but I feel like in terms of bringing in fresh talent, it's a requirement for these teams. Otherwise, you're going to have 5 25-year-olds, which is not going to be sustainable for the future. You need to have some development coming in, just in terms of having players that haven't been ruined by their egos or some tendencies of bad in-game leaders brought onto them. I want my in-game leaders to be able to craft and mold these players into what they want and turn them into the sharpest tools we have available.
All right. So what sort of support comes from Cloud9 in terms of the team creation? Do you have analysts and scouts, or are you going to sign analysts to the team in the future? What kind of support staff are you going to have?
So we are keeping on our analyst from the Cloud9 roster before Mix. He's going to be joining us on a
Nice.
trial basis. Anyone that was already there in that regard who wanted to stay on, they have a trial with me up until Flashpoint Season 2. We're going to kind of analyze how that one went. It's very difficult for me to gauge who to get the right people in for this. I don't know what the team is right now. So, of course, for coach, I know who I want, but for analysts, assistant coaches, those are roles I'm going to fill, and names I will announce in the coming weeks as well. And I'm excited to work with people and see what they can bring to the table. It's a role I don't really have much experience with. Back in my day when I was playing, we didn't have analysts. We didn't have assistant coaches. At the most, we'd have a manager/coach. So I'm really interested to see what these guys can bring to the table. And they're going to have to work for it. They're going to have to prove themselves. Like, I don't care what they've done in previous teams. I have a different vision. Casada has a different vision to what they've done. And that's why I'm putting everyone on a trial for now. There's not a player. They'll be brought into Flashpoint and we analyze their play after that. So Cloud9 have given me absolutely everything I need in terms of budget for those things, but I'm not sure exactly who I want yet. I want to see how that role is provided to me with the players or the staff I have available now, ascertain how good they are, go from there, because honestly, there's so much to do right now. Having someone who's already in position, is already on the payroll, that's fine for now. I know they're doing a good job, and we'll see how it develops.
So finally, as the last question, when is the deadline for getting this roster together? Is it the start of Flashpoint 2?
Yep, I have to have a roster ready for Flashpoint, and I'll be there with a roster of some variety. I hope it's my final 5. I really hope it is. But considering the length of time it takes for some of these contract negotiations, that might not be realistic. I have at least 3 of my players signed, and I'm hoping they'll be at the event and we'll be there in full force. My objective is to win that tournament for sure. That's if I get the 5-man roster I want. I hope it happens. I can only hope it does, but we'll see what goes through. And I guess keep an eye on my Twitter. I will be announcing every player in a bi-weekly basis and making sure that it's a bit of hype. Obviously, you've seen how I've been operating here. I'm going to kind of give some clues and tease it a little bit, but we're going to keep it real and make sure everyone's up to date. And I don't know if you noticed as well, every player I'm releasing, it doesn't come through Cloud9 channels. I'm working with a different media outlet. Every single time I announce a player, it's the real story. It's a proper narrative, not our control. So hopefully you guys will see I'm doing this in a different way. And then it's a slight Easter egg. I might ask your opinion on this as well. I will be announcing all of the salaries, contract lengths, and transfer fees of all my players. So
I like that, dude, because I like if you guys are paying these guys really well and the buyouts, I want people to know that Flashpoint teams can pay those. Yeah.
Yep, that's what I want to do. I don't know why we're shying away from that. I see this as the big investments, absolutely.
Yes.
But there's investments in great talent and the future of what we're building here at Cloud9. I want that message to be very clear from the get-go, what we're doing, and a declaration of intent of what our plans are for the future. And I think that's the only way to do it. I'm not trying to hide the fact we're investing a lot of money in Counter-Strike. I think it's very important and it should be celebrated. So for me, that's important. Transparency, making sure the fans are part of the journey with us. They know what the deals are, how long these players are in for, and how much we're investing in it as well. It's very important to me. Hopefully it doesn't, I know it's not going to go down well. Some orgs aren't going to like it. But that's the way I take it in the future.
That's such a bummer for them, you know. I feel so bad.
Yeah.
Look, man, I'm loving it. Anything they can get more teams over to Flashpoint and make it competitive, we're all about. So thank you for coming with the big dick announcement, Henry G. You and Cloud9. Appreciate your time. It's the end of our hour. If you missed it, this will be out on YouTube tomorrow. So look forward to the Flashpoint Twitter, Henry's Twitter, Cloud9's Twitter, our Twitters, Thorn and myself. And you'll see that if you missed any of the content. And we will be back next week with hopefully more discussion and more announcements. Thank you very much.